Now, exploring the mysteries of China's unique natural glass. If I can quote Cervantes, first of all, from Don Quixote, in order to attain the impossible, one must attempt the absurd. And I think possibly you will find some of what I'm going to say at first glance absurd. But I'm going to try and take you on a quixotic armchair voyage of discovery, which will not involve any skiing. The Hongshan culture, as Melanie said, dates to 3,500 to 2,000 years before the current era, or BCE, and seems to have been based largely, if not entirely, in what is now Liaoning and Inner Mongolia. My first encounter with Shui jing occurred in October 2007, courtesy of Mr. Wong, a friend of mine, in the Hong Kong Jade Market. And this very humble little piece, which those of you that were at my lecture last night will recognize as a zhulong, in a material which I was not familiar with. And it cost me 300 Hong Kong dollars, and I thought, you know, I must get this home and look at it. It's the zhulong, or pig dragon, is one of the classical Hongshan icons. And this is just an example of a nephrite jade zhulong. Nephrite jade is a lot easier because it's actually a highly reactive mineral, and as a function partly of time, you will get changes such as we see here, weathering, expansion and hydration of what is actually a highly reactive mineral. I'm not, however, talking about jade tonight, at least not nephrite jade. And I want to say that I really do think it's important, if you're looking at, if you're interested in archaic jade, to get a microscope. This cost about 2,000 Hong Kong dollars, and actually I also have a fitting of the eyepiece, which allows me to take photographs down it, which are reasonably good. Now this piece, if you look here in the middle of these side images, you'll see a little nipple here, which I think indicates that this was drilled out finally with a bamboo drill bit. And I always look in the recesses of these pieces, of such pieces, and you can't see this clearly here, but I'll show you in another slide in a moment. I found these little glistening microspheres. And this is blown up somewhat, and what I've done on the right is altered the color balance, so you can see these little spheres showing up. And they vary in diameter from about 100 microns down to maybe 5 or 10. So what were these? I mean, glistening stones used to grind something. I thought maybe these are diamond, and we'll come back to that in a moment. Now, the technology that was used, this is actually 2 frames from a film, The Road Home, which shows a man, obviously, you know, a genuine driller of holes, using a bow drill to drill porcelain, which is extremely hard, and backwards and forwards movement, in his case with obviously a diamond tipped bit which is held. This is, the thumb is here pressing on a piece of wood that has a hole in it, and he's rotating with his hand, his other hand, he's rotating this backwards and forwards using this bow twisted round the bit. So this is a classical bow drill. You see it better down here. And that is relevant because we believe that that technology was developed in the Neolithic period, if not before. Now, what is Shui jing? Well, one of the confusing issues is that the term is used, it means clear crystal in Chinese. It's used for quartz crystal and for glass. But this material that I'm going to be talking about contains bubbles, and it's not crystalline, it's glass. And I showed that piece on a discussion forum, and various people responded with howls of derisive laughter and said, look, just look on eBay, it's flooding onto eBay. Prices are ridiculous, it can't possibly be right. So I looked immediately on eBay, found that they were right, and started to collect it at much, much lower cost than I paid for jade or agate. So first of all, let's look at some small pendants in Shui Jing, most of which were bought on eBay from dealers in China for $2 to $5 or at Shirley He Market, Beijing, where one usually paid half that because that's what the dealers are paying, mostly between 2008 and 2012. Here are a group of pieces in clear glass, relatively clear glass. Probably the staining on some of these is surface soil staining. Note some of these, this piece is a lovely kneeling horse, has really been worn. I mean, it must have been worn for decades by the wearer. This fish, I'll just point out that this looks like scratch marks, but it isn't. In fact, it's encased bubbles. When you look at it under the microscope, this is a cluster of bubbles. And the iconography is right. Here's a classical Zhulong, pig dragon, with a cicada on its back, and a lot of originality. Then we also have red pieces, and we'll talk about the red in a moment. Again, you can see at least two Zhulong icons here. The iconography, you have to take it from me, is very, very close, similar to that you see in nephrite jade. Here we have some in a sort of cobalt blue colour, and this is interesting here, a rhinoceros. Of course, you don't get rhinoceroses up in Inner Mongolia now, but you probably did 5,000 years ago. A bit phallic, this one. We'll come on to some of the more sexual pieces in a moment. A cicada, lovely, lovely cobalt blue glass, and we haven't proved what the colour is due to. Now, here are four pieces. You're seeing two sides of them. I've put them crisscross. Again, you'll see here a Zhulong, pig dragon. It's got to be, you know, Hongshan. That's a classical Hongshan icon. And these pieces, with an opalescent colouring, are really were among the most valued. You can say that because the polish put on them is much, much, much higher than it is on the other pieces. Note here that this drill hole across here has been polished out, or polished so it looks, or you can almost don't pick it up, and that's very unusual with the other glass. Then there are seals. Now again, you've got classical Hongshan iconography, two pig dragons here, a skull, a bird, and something wacky, and a tortoise or turtle. And characters. Clearly, these seals, some of them were clearly used more than others, but I've got a collection now of about 30 such seals, many of them with different and illegible characters on them. So classical Hongshan iconography, and a desperate need for script expert to work on these and other characters, because the earliest Chinese script that is documented is from the Shang dynasty in the oracle bones. Now, to wake you up, phallic pendants. Hongshan was noted for its erotic and sexual art, and many pieces contain other Hongshan icons, and this is a collection of dicks that I've got, little dick pendants. You can see that a lot of them have, this one here probably has a bird image. There's cicadas, and they're rather small little things, and clearly intended to be worn by somebody. And this one also doubles up as a cicada. And I want to now tell you a sad story, a sad case of the broken red dick, because I took my first dick home and showed my wife. And she said, well, look, Elena's coming to clean the house soon, so you better put it away. So I put it onto my wife's desk, which was, And unfortunately, it was red, and it wasn't this one. It was like this, however. And what happened was Elena came in and dusted. She's not terribly careful with dusting. She wasn't expecting to see a semi-translucent dick, and she knocked my dick off and broke it. Okay, so this dick has been, it's one of the most studied pieces of Hongshan Shui jing that you will ever come across, and I'll refer to some of that a bit later. Now, there are also larger pieces of carved glass with typical Hongshan iconography. Fish icons are quite common, actually, in my experience in Hongshan. This is a marvellous fish. You can see this is a pseudo photograph. Of course, it's two photographs, mounted in Photoshop. Wonderful fish, and this really dramatic curved red streaking. Dishes here, bowls. These pieces, by and large, I got for the starting price, which is about 22 US. But again, a Hongshan type icon here, wonderful carved bowl, and if you look at it under high power, you can see that the streaks go through. This is not cast, this was carved from one piece of glass. And this one actually has a bit of a crack in the bottom, which might have been present when it was carved. If we look at a couple of sea dragons compared to a jade sea dragon on the left, the proportions, I think the proportion of this one is absolutely perfect. It actually is 22 centimetres by 21, and this one's more or less the same double sea dragon. It's an idea that you sometimes see in jade as well. And the question one has to ask is, who, you know, if you're saying that these are modern fakes, it's a pretty poor business model, because these are costing really, I mean, you can buy them on eBay, or you could, as I said, for 22 US dollars. Now, at the other end of Shui jing, in terms of purity, are things like this, a sea dragon with enclosed material here, which was clearly carved to the same extent, but has since rotted away. On the other side of the face, there are lots of bubbles. It's really, really grotty piece of glass, full of inclusions and things. But this material is very interesting, and we'll return to what that is, because quite often, even in a very perfect looking piece like this turtle in cobalt blue, you see that the carver has left a small area of what was clearly there when it was originally carved, as found, presumably. Here's another example, one of the larger pieces that I've got in this opalescent glass. It's maybe in some respects quite an ugly piece, but it's some sort of figure sitting on the back of a cicada with mixed iconography. But here you've got encased in the glass this whitish material, and I shall put forward a case that what this is this is obviously not glass. It's obviously been there since the glass was found or made or whatever, and it's probably partial melt from something that the glass was in contact with or hit when it was formed. This is just an example of two extremes, again in clear glass, of almost perfect glass here, and really grotty glass in a cicada. Lots of black inclusions, streaks, bubbles. These are clusters of bubbles. So it varies very much in quality, Shui jing, the actual original material. This is a nice plaque that I've just put up, because it's got 8 characters on it, carved in relief, and it's been polished, but there are, you can see it's glass, there are sort of conchoidal fractures. This piece is one of the biggest pieces that I've seen in Shirley Her Market in Beijing. It's an enormous piece of glass, and I shall argue a bit later that it would actually be impossible to make this glass. But let's look now at the extraordinary case of glass tubes. There are small tubes, large tubes, and I've got some evidence I'll talk about that the holes are at least partially natural. Here are some typical little tubes which you can see. They've got they're stained with surface soil, they're hollow, and they've got little charming little carvings on them which you can unroll and see are here there's a horse, a scorpion, a couple of rather sweet fish, a ladybird maybe, two birds, and a beautiful hawk. These are only really visible if you actually unravel, so to speak, the piece. Now, I said that, I mean, what is the colour of this clear glass? Because all the tubes all seem to be in uncoloured glass. I mean, there may be varying degrees of yellow, but this is one which I got a laboratory, local laboratory, analytical laboratory, boiled this up in concentrated nitric and hydrochloric acid at high temperature for 4 hours. And the intention, which we partially fulfilled, was to actually look at the mineral composition of what came off. And you can see the glass completely untouched, but it's got rid of all this stuff. And there, I think, would be quite a research project to be done in some small pieces, doing this in a concerted way, and then looking at the properties of, or the soil signature, if you like. We don't know how far into the glass this penetrates, but this glass is extraordinarily hard, and it weathers extremely slowly. Now, if those small pieces are interesting, the large tubes are astonishing. Bear some, have some sympathy for me, because these tubes I actually had to pay $22 a piece for. And they're carved in relief. Here's a sort of mermaid figure. Often they have hawks on, or cow gods. The holes are not always circular. Here is a diagram of two pieces. This one, you can see here the horned cow god, and this rather interesting pattern. And in cross-section, it's circular, but it's got 4 score marks going right the way down, which I suspect were done with diamonds, on a pull-through. This piece has been carved in relief, and here it's one of the pieces where there's actually a right angle in the hole. Now, it's difficult to drill a hole in glass with a right angle. I don't know, we missed a slide. But if you, I think I might have missed one. I've got pieces, and actually John has got a skull you can look at afterwards, which shows that if there's nothing to work on, the drilling, was really irregular through the piece, and it wouldn't be possible for a large piece. This is an astonishing cross-section. Now, if anybody can tell me how you can drill a hole with a triangle that is triangular, I'll be very interested. I'm sure that at the very best, these holes existed. They might not have been perfect triangles or perfect squares or perfect but you'd have to have something there to ream out. And the artistic effect of that with certain incident light is astonishing. Here's a carved figure on that same piece, lit up by sunlight reflected off that inner long surface. It looks like the figure's asleep. So, what is the evidence that the holes are natural? I've forgotten, I got out of order slightly in my mind. There are examples of holes carved by drilling and examples of holes that could not have been drilled. So here is an example of a hole carved in a little piece about 2 inches long with a cow on the outside, showing just how erratic drilling, with a bow drill or whatever they were using through this really hard glass would be. And as I said, John has got a skull here, which he'll show you, with the same sort of effect. Now, these pieces are examples of pieces where the holes could not have been drilled. This piece here, the bottom, this is it under higher power, consists of a cluster of hundreds of little holes which don't even coalesce. In fact, the centre is actually solid, and around it there's this cluster of holes. And obviously the carver has used that, and somehow he's managed to carve, you know, a very interesting shape on the surface using these natural holes, because these couldn't have been drilled. This piece up here, which is sort of phallic piece, has got a hole which from the tip, which then disappears, and it's got multiple ramifications. Again, that's got to have been there, and it looks like it's some sort of explosive process in the formation of the glass that has caused these. This is one of several pieces where the hole is tapering, and in this case it's got a piece of glass actually blocking it off. So again, that couldn't have been drilled. It must have been there, and the piece was carved around it. Likewise, I suspect with this piece, because the hole is irregular, and this is a sort of cow god image here. There's if you look inside, there's the hole, and here's a piece of glass that's actually missing. Did this sort of fall out when the thing was still molten, and then when it was carved it was removed? Something very odd. Okay, now let's move to what is Shui Jing, and we'll first consider possible candidates. I'll tell you something about its physical properties and the composition of the clear glass. And this is with the help of Dr. Andy Bushby at Queen Mary, University of London, and Gareth Hatton and colleagues at Johnson Matthey. What are the possible candidates? Well, it could be man-made, of course, in which case it would have to have network modifiers and stabilizers which effectively reduce the temperature of a melting of the glass, so that it can be worked. Or it could be natural, in which case the candidates are obsidian, which is volcanic, which almost always contains high levels of felsic minerals because it's formed from lava which then cools rapidly. Fulgurite is interesting. Lightning strike on sand causes rather irregular tubes of glass because the temperatures are very, very high and the sand will melt instantaneously. Or a meteorite impact, a tektite, with impact on pure sand. So let's go back to this chap. He's been put to good use. He's had very sophisticated efficient track dating done in Pisa without very much success because there's no uranium-238 in the glass. But very informative is the electron probe microanalysis done by Gareth Hatton. And it shows that, first of all, it's almost pure silicon dioxide with no network modifiers such as sodium or stabilizers such as calcium. The red streaks, I'll show you in a moment, map to iron, aluminium, potassium and sodium. And the melting temperature is in excess of 1,600 centigrade. So it's not the sort of glass you make for fun. Now, if you look on the left here, this is embedded a piece of the red dick embedded in plastic and then polished finely and then subjected to electron probe analysis, mineral analysis. And this area here, in the next slide you'll see it rotated 90 degrees to the left. And the backscatter image is here, which we've just seen. So if you look, these are where the red streaks occur. Here's iron mapping perfectly to the red streaks, aluminium mapping perfectly to the red streaks, potassium mapping perfectly to the red streaks, and sodium, lower levels, mapping perfectly. And you've got holes, of course, here. When you look at silica, there's obviously less silica because there are these other components. So this means that the red streaks are coming from an earth-based mineral, could well be a felsic lava, which has been blasted through the glass in some way. Now, let's turn, so we know something about the red streaks, if the red dick is representative of all other dicks and all other red glass. Now, what are the precedents for impact glasses? First of all, glass formed from melt is caused by every sizable meteorite impact. I'm not going to define sizable, but there's more than enough to get through the atmosphere and cause a big bang. Most, however, of what is produced are rather dirty glasses, such as you see in the Australian tektites. Moldavite is a particularly interesting glass, I'll show you, formed 14 million years ago, distributed over Moldavia, and Libyan Desert Glass about 28 million years ago. Now, let's look at Europe's own impact crater. It's well worth visiting if you're in Bavaria. The Ries crater, the Ries crater and the town of Nördlingen has a museum there. And the crater, which you can see in a moment, it's 28 kilometers in diameter, and it was caused by a 1 kilometer diameter bolide about 14 million years ago. And this is actually the town of Nördlingen viewed from the top of the tower. And the walls, by strange coincidence, are virtually exactly the diameter of the impactor or bolide that caused the crater. The ratio is roughly 20 to 1. So a 28 kilometer diameter crater will have a bolide slightly more than a kilometer in diameter. And the town of Nördlingen, by the way, is made, much of it is made, and certainly the church is made from stuff called Shuivite, which is just junk thrown up from this massive impact. The temperatures and pressures immediately after impact, within a second, go up to estimated 30,000 centigrade. Pressures are so great that the impactor and the rock contracted to a quarter of its initial volume and then exploded. So the crater is caused by this massive explosion. And this is Moldavite. This is an example of Moldavite pinched from a seller on eBay, but it's characteristic green glass. It's actually only about 70% silica. And then we have, and that's semi-precious material, the best pieces of it. We have Libyan Desert Glass, and we don't know where the impactor was because it's probably covered up in the desert somewhere, the crater. But it's been dated to 28 million years below present and was carved by the ancient Egyptians. Here is a famous ornament from Tutankhamun's tomb with this scarab carved in Libyan desert glass. There are massive deposits in Libya's Great Sand Sea, something like, I've read somewhere, estimates of 100 million tons, which tends to be exposed at the bottom of sand dunes. The impactor site is unknown, but dated to 28 million years ago by fission track and argon dating. And here's a piece of Libyan desert glass, which looks pretty similar to the sort of stuff we're talking about. So is this in fact Gobi desert glass, and we just don't know where the impact site was? My provisional conclusion is that Shui jing is a natural glass. It's almost pure silica, and the big pieces make it absolutely insane to make this glass, if not impossible. You've got to get the temperature up to more than 1600 before it will melt. And big pieces such as I showed you would be impossible to melt. David Dunstan says that this could not be produced man-made. The red streaks map to iron, aluminium, potassium, possibly contamination at the time of formation. Right, now, what about those little chaps that I said might be diamonds? Well, the nature of the glistening, let's look at the nature of the glistening microspheres in the Julong suspension hole, and then two extraordinary carved pieces which appear to contain diamonds actually encased within the glass, which has never been described before. You remember this figure, and I was able to extract some of these. I think we've done it on 4 of them, 3 from this piece and 1 from another piece, and actually looked at their composition. Now, the appearance and composition on electron microscopy, a technique called EDX, I'll show you in a moment, and micro-Raman spectroscopy, to which I'm indebted to these two people in the Department of Physics at Queen Mary University of London. This is Andy Bushby, who's a friend and has been very helpful. And here is what one of those little microspheres looks like under electron microscopy. It doesn't look really like a diamond, does it? But then, of course, these things, if it's an impact diamond, which by the way is by far the commonest form of diamond on the surface of this planet, then it's formed within a second of impact from graphite deep within the site of impact, or maybe superficially, anywhere within reach of these massive temperatures and pressures. And Nördlingen, the town that I showed you, the town is estimated to have something like 17,000 kilograms of diamonds in the walls of the town. I'm not sure how they calculated that. Anyway, on EDX, this peak is pure carbon. And if I just move backwards again, if you look at these areas here, that's silica. But this area here, pure carbon. That's not watertight evidence on its own, but Raman spectroscopy, last time I was in London, we got very strong data, Ignacio Hernandez, using micro-Raman spectroscopy. Diamond is supposed to give a peak at a Raman shift of 1332 centimeters to the -1. I have no idea what that is. And there is a perfect diamond peak. So these are micro diamonds, and they don't look like modern synthetic diamonds, because the EM appearance of a modern synthetic diamond is like this. It's like you expect a diamond to be, and that's its peak. Well, now, any other evidence that diamonds are involved in any way? I would suggest to you that this glass would have been much easier to carve once they had discovered diamonds. And if the glass is a meteoritic glass or a tektite, it's an extraordinary tektite, a type that's never been described before, because the colours, you don't get those colours in Libyan Desert Glass, then the chances are pretty good in that part of the world that micro diamonds will have been formed. And I'll tell you an anecdote that Stalin actually established a gulag in the middle of the Poppygay impact crater in Siberia because of the massive quantity of alluvial diamonds. They're pretty useless diamonds. I mean, they're impact diamonds. But he actually set up a prisoner camp to mine diamonds. So there are more diamonds actually in the Poppygay crater, estimated according to Falco Langenhorst, than there are in all of the diamond mines in the world. Well, what I found was extraordinary was this piece, where it's a skull mask, and I've got the sister piece, which doesn't have anything very interesting. It looks the same shape. And here, if you look at it sideways on, there's a streak of bubbles, which you see, and there's also a streak of black and shiny things. And there's a whole lot of what appeared to be glistening microspheres sitting in a pool of carbon. This one's actually quite big. It's about 0.5 of a millimetre in diameter. We haven't been able to prove that these are diamond, but it's difficult to see what else. There's certainly some form of extraneous crystal. This is Professor Alan Boyd, who's a friend who's been very helpful, and this is the same piece that you've just seen. And we took this little chap here, sitting on the surface of a bubble, and he's done scanning electron microscopy. It doesn't really prove much, but, oh, sorry, this little chap, I was looking, this little fellow here. These are just half bubbles, and this is obviously the carving surface. And if we look under higher power, you see that it's sort of like an egg-like sphere actually sitting in a bit of a cavity. So we might, if we're very careful, be able to get this out and do micro-Raman spectroscopy on it. It doesn't work for any of the ones that are embedded. We haven't done that yet. This piece is an astonishing fish, because in this little line of bubbles here, there's a glistening thing about 3 millimeters in diameter. So it does look, and a friend of mine, James Griffiths, got another piece which seems to have micro diamonds encased in it. It does look as if this glass, when it was formed, might have been blasted through some rubbish which contained impact diamonds. Well, now, there is, I'm now going to show you evidence that Shui jing is still being mined, and they don't really know what to do with it. And I haven't been able to find the mines, but we'll talk about that in a moment. So we've got crudely carved pieces, we've got balls, sort of business executive toys, and shards. Now this is an example of this is a pseudo quartz crystal. It's in the same material, the red streaked Shui jing, and they've obviously got a market for quartz crystals because they think this stuff should be shaped like quartz crystals because it's silicon dioxide. Of course, it's a glass and not crystalline. But if you look at this from the bottom, the faces, especially these two faces, are not parallel. So this is, and it's got bubbles in it. So this is a sort of a crude attempt to produce a quartz, to make a quartz crystal. And this was priced at quite 2,000 renminbi. I didn't buy it. But, so that's a pseudo quartz crystal. That's one thing you can do with it. Oh, I'm sorry, I keep on pointing things out which I can see and you can't. So these faces here, I mean, this is way off parallel to that. And this is nearly parallel, and that's nearly parallel. So that's a crudely carved modern piece. This piece is really an astonishing slice. This was measured 66 centimeters across at the base. And it appears to have been cut from a sphere of glass. And this extraordinary radiating effect is reminiscent of some of the pieces that I've shown you, particularly those fish. If you look at it closely from the other side, it's got encased material, which I would suggest is partial melt of something that the glass, when it was formed and ejected, hit. And the same goes for the outside. And this is just to remind you of the shape of our beautiful fish, the curved glass. So is it possible that this was carved out of a sphere of glass? I think so. This is one of two that I've seen, but there were a number on a website which has now been taken down, showing what modern man can do if he wants to make, a business toy which you then put on a rotating on a disc that you can rotate. Clearly the same material, and then this was photographed in a shop in Hong Kong. A friend of mine has bought it. It's just a blob of glass. This bit was given to me, actually. This weighed 16 kilograms, and a dealer in Beijing, whom I buy quite a lot, have bought quite a lot from, gave it to me. And you can see, I mean, they've sort of tried to cut it a bit and, then just given up and thought, well, it'll make quite a nice blob. Here, Joseph Muller recently came back from China, and he went to a porcelain factory and found that this glass, there were piles of this glass. These are two shards. This has just been crushed and turned into a glaze for glazing porcelain in this particular factory. Now, I'm going to quote Albert Einstein. If at first an idea is not absurd, then there's no hope for it. And I rather like that. I don't think one should be criticised for having absurd ideas. So I had the absurd idea of trying to find where an impact crater. And rumours and links to Hongshan suggest that the glass is coming from Liaoning or Inner Mongolia. I mean, if you go to dealers, many of them will say it's coming from Dongbei province. And I'd got a direct lead 3 years ago to a place, and the guy said he could take me to it. If the glass is meteoritic, then where are the strewn field, where is the strewn field, and where is the impact site? And one should point to the other. So let's look at the Earth Impact Database. And you find, if you look at the Earth Impact Database, I haven't looked recently, but 2 years ago, there were 22 impact craters in the United States, about the same number in Canada. Both of those have the same surface area as China. There were 20 in Russia, which is twice the surface area, but that included the Poppygay crater, which is one of the biggest in the world. And there was one in China, if you're scratching around, Dunlun. So something's happened. There's something like 20 missing impact craters in China. Somebody's stolen our impact craters. Now, this is a map, as you see Beijing here. This is Mongolia up here. And immediately I looked on Google Earth, I found two very interesting looking craters here. This is Abagchi, this is Shilinghop. And so I thought, I discussed this with the head of the Crater Museum in Nördlingen, Michael Schieber. He thought they might be impact craters. Maybe they're volcanic calderas. It's certainly a volcanic area. But these measure the north crater is 4 kilometers across, the south crater is 5 kilometers across, decent sized craters. And why would you have two calderas so close together? I don't know. If you look at this is a Russian contour map. This one has multiple ridges, which is certainly evident when you walk into it. This one has a really pretty straight climb up of about 300 foot to a relatively flat area, and maybe there's something missing here. I mean, it does look a little bit odd. It's not pure. It looks as if something might have been happening here. And then there's this raised ridge here. And if you look, I got this from Martin Ruzak, who Wang Ha Man put me in contact with, and he does his geology from outer space. I mean, he's in NASA, and this is with a 10 times vertical exaggeration. This is what the two craters look like. Again, reinforcing this idea that there might be a bite out here, and they're very close together. So we decided to go to. I decided to go and visit the craters. I tried to persuade some other people to come. The only person I could get for the first, which is called the Jimdaft expedition, it was the initials of the people involved, was Joseph Muller and a couple of Chinese. There was Yolanda and her father, who's in the background here, who I managed to hijack willingly to come and join us. That was good. That gave us sort of Chinese cover. I mean, it was quite amusing, because I was sat in a seat next to Yolanda for 2 hours on the tarmac at Hong Kong, and she said, "What are you doing?" And it turned out what she was doing was she was going to spend a week with her father, and she didn't know what she was going to do. So we had two places, and I said, "Well, we're paying for the travel. I mean, you and your father can just come along and just have to pay for your food." So following day, she said, "Yeah, we'll do that." So we went, and this is what this is what the North Crater looks like. It's a pretty desolate area. I'll just show you some photographs, but there's a lot of broken volcanic stuff, and Joseph and I really didn't know what we were doing. We knew what we were supposed to be looking for, but we didn't really know how to do it. And we just got a nice feel for, this is the area in the North Crater where there are all these ridges going, and then this is what it looks like from the edge, the inner edge, looking across to the center of the crater. There's what turns out to be, I mean, this is volcanic here. And then this is a composite of the North Crater. And the South Crater has got steeper sides. These were the sole 5 trees we found on this crater. That's what it looks like at the edge. So then I got quite a lot of samples, and I got quite excited because I didn't really know what I was doing. So the following year, I had got a lead as to where the glass might be coming from. And so we established a second expedition. Again, it lasted for about 4 days, which I called the Red Hot Balls of Fire, or REDHOTBOF expedition. And we were immediately hit by ethnic riots. I mean, a week or two before we got there, somebody, Mongolian, was run over by a miner driving a lorry, a mine lorry. And that happened to exactly happened in Abagchi. So we decided we'd go to try and visit the potential site of the glass mines, but they were involved in ethnic riots too, ethnic problems. And so we just said, right, well, we'll go back to the craters. And when we got there, obviously the police were very interested. This is Abagchi, and this is where the craters are. And I think we probably, they said, what do you want to do? Why is this? And Joseph pointed out that I was a mad doctor who was very interested in the craters. And so they let us go, provided a police escort for us. And here are these are our two policemen. This one actually brought his daughter for the first day. And they were just completely bemused. They hadn't the slightest idea what we were doing, but they let us just wander around the craters. And we took them to lunch in this yurt, or whatever it's called here, with the Mongolians, and we paid for lunch, and everybody was very happy. And then they stood us. This is Keegan, our geologist, doing geology. And the conclusion that we came to was that there was, when we took samples back, etc., that we didn't find any evidence that these are other than volcanic. We didn't find any evidence for other than volcanic activity. But of course it's a volcanic field, and if you throw something big at it, you could crack the Earth's crust if it's superficial enough and set off volcanic activity again. Well then, what about the glass mines? Well, this chap, Jimmy, we called him, was very, very helpful. But I think in the time that, and he told me, at least I understood, that yes, they had got a glass mine because we bought that red glass ball from him. Yes, and there had been interest in it by the government, and then the government didn't find any use for this stuff, so they handed it over for private exploitation, I think in the 1980s. And when we got back, the story had changed completely. No, you misunderstood. What we meant to say was that we mine quartz, and then we send it down to the place where all the quartz is already, and they crush it up and they make the red glass by adding copper. So that kind of closed off. Anyway, it was raining by then, incredibly hard. We couldn't have got to see it. But the conclusion from the two expeditions, at the twin craters, the evidence on the ground is all volcanic. But the evidence from the air, I must say, looks very odd. An economy with the truth over the Shui Jing mines east of Shilinghot as the story changed. Well, Carl Sagan said, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So it's very difficult with impact craters unless you get unless you hit it lucky, and we can discuss what evidence, what you would get, what you would need in order to say it was an impact crater. And also, I like Oscar Wilde, an idea that isn't dangerous is unworthy of being called an idea at all. So I'm just going to finish with a Wilde idea. Dumbbell-shaped bolides are very common, and we better watch out for them. What if one crossed our orbit? So this is, if these turned out to be impact craters, this is a model which would also provide an explanation for strewn glass in Inner Mongolia and Liaoning, and possibly a number of different sites. So here we are, Dumbo, the bolide, is coming in 20 kilometers per second. We know what it would measure because the ratio is 20 to 1, so it would be about 0.6 kilometers by 0.25, biggish, quite a decent size. So it hits the atmosphere, and let's say it breaks into three. Two more or less equal size, and a third one, which I'm putting at 50 meters across. And those two hit perhaps a second or a second and a half before Jobo, because I named I had to put Joseph in, was slowed by the shock wave. So then that hits 1 to 2 seconds after the other two. And you is it possible that you got this sort of effect? There's got to be something quite extraordinary about this glass. It's got to be shot off at a very, very low angle, because then the only way you can make spheres of glass that size is by rendering them weightless. And if you chuck them up into the stratosphere, like happened in the Reese crater, you just end up with sort of splats of glass. So that then lands maybe, I mean, these look quite young craters, so maybe this happened 1 million or 2 years ago, I don't know. It needs to be looked at, I think. And then, of course, it reactivated volcanism at and around the impact site, obscured the primary cause, and confuses geologists, geologists, and other sensible people. And this is just to remind you of what the topographical map of these craters look. It's not necessarily a ridiculous idea. It's certainly a testable hypothesis made difficult by the constraints of going to China. First step, I would suggest, is to find the strewn field where the glass is still being mined, because that has to be a pointer to the impact site. And all we have so far is rumour. And I don't know, I mean, if any Chinese or people with friends in geology in China can suggest how we can actually go to, I mean, what we can do to find this out. I mean, we just have to get somebody to tell us, yes, we have the mine, and then we'll go there. Evidence, well, then you'd look for evidence of impact features in rocks around the craters, and there are well established shatter cones, shocked quartz, high pressure minerals, and features within the glass. But we certainly, I think we can make a strong case for use of, for that the glass is a tektite of extremely unusual form, and that they used, whoever carved it, whenever they carved it, used not synthetic diamonds, but naturally occurring micro diamonds, which would also be a feature of the impact. So my conclusions are that the Hongshan people were almost certainly the first to carve Shui jing. They used their technology, which you'll see in my book and discussed. You can see that if they've learned how to carve jade and agate, then all they have to find is a harder grinding material. Shui jing is, I believe, a unique meteoritic impact glass. It certainly fits the evidence better than other hypotheses, such as a volcanic glass. It's a pure silica glass with no additives, and like Libyan Desert Glass. The size of the spheres, of which we have one example of a slice cut from it, points to ejection at a low angle, at least of some of the glass. So you might expect some of it to splat upwards, some to splat downwards, some to splat sideways. And micro diamonds in the drill holes suggest impact origin for the magic sand, I'm calling it. I believe Shui jing is still being actively mined in northern China, but nobody really knows it has a very good use for it. It's just been wasted. And the location of mines and the strewn field would be a key to the impact site. Now let's just finish with a couple of quotes. Edward de Bono said, "The need to be right all the time is the biggest bar to new ideas. It's better to have enough ideas for some of them to be wrong than to always be right by having no ideas at all." And Arthur C. Clarke said that new ideas pass through 3 periods. 1, it can't be done. 2, it probably can be done, but it's not worth doing. I think that's probably where we are now. And 3, I knew it was a good idea all along. So finally, my thanks, as well as to you, go to a number of people for help in these studies. People at Queen Mary College, Professor Giulio Bigazzi at CNR Pisa, Michael Shiba, who's become a friend at the Reese Crater Museum, various people, Natural History Museum of London and Vienna. I mean, they're pretty sceptical, but they've been very helpful. People at Johnson Matthey, who've given me some of the major hard data that I showed you about what the red streaks are caused by. And then various miscellaneous people, Wang Haoman, who put me in touch with Martin Ruzak, Alan Gillespie, Wang Xiaoping, who's a very nice geologist in Beijing, whom I'm trying to lean on to actually take this further, Keegan Alana, Joseph Muller, and my son Bruce. Thank you very much.
Say that the Shui jing glass is unique impact glass. meteorites that have landed that have created similar glass elsewhere in the world. Have you looked at that evidence to see the comparison between that type of glass and Shui jing glass?
Well, as I said, the nearest in composition is Libyan Desert Glass. I mean, that is also almost, it's 98-99% pure silica glass. So that's a very good precedent. Problem is nobody actually knows where the impact site is for that, so we don't know what the dynamics of production were or how big an impactor it was.
There are 20 sites in Canada and the US.
Well, a lot of...
research there will tell you there's some similar material.
But these are extending back over, hundreds of millions of years. I mean, yes, there are examples, I mean, of craters that have cracked open and led to secondary volcanic activity. The individual, I mean, obviously it depends what it hits. First of all, you've got so many variables. You've got the variable, the composition of the meteorite. Is it metallic or is it an ordinary chondritic meteorite? Where does it hit? To get pure glass, it's got to hit pure sandstone, probably, or desert. That's why it's attractive to postulate that this is Gobi Desert glass. And then you've got the physics. I think the physics of this particular impact have to be absolutely unique. I mean, if you've just, I don't believe a single impactor going in would do it. And often they come in twos. I mean, the Reese crater, there's a sister crater called the Steinheim crater. It's 40 kilometers away, but it probably occurred in the same event, probably sort of just piggybacking. So quite a lot of impacts on the moon and elsewhere are double impacts. But we know that there's lots of dumbbell-shaped bolides out there. So you'd have to, I mean, working backwards, if, and I'm not saying I'm right, I just say that this is a possibility that which we will pursue further if we can find the strewn field of glass, and where the mines are now. And that will or may or may not point to the possibility that these, or it may point to other possible craters. These look very different from any other craters around, though, and that's why I'm attracted to the idea that there'll be unique physics, because if you eject the stuff upwards, like happened to Reese, up into the stratosphere, it won't form very big balls of glass. Which then go bounce, 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 bounce as the outer skin cools down, picking up this semi-liquid soil material as it goes. But I don't think we should be surprised that there would be particular unique impact that's possible. It could be just a one-off. Yeah.
I've seen Shui jing from China with bubble inside.
Yes.
With water inside.
Have you?
Drop water inside, and some with insect inside. So my question is, if to follow your theory, your lecture, what sort of this meteorite impact, what sort of crystal when I travel next time to look for?
Well, I mean, I think you just look for bubbles. I mean, the colours, the different, there's enormous variation. I don't know about insects. I can't see how. Well, you get sort of insectoid-like things. You get little fibrous things, black objects, which.
No, this is a million years ago. This pure crystal. I mean, Shui jing, real Shui jing.
Well, yeah, I'd like to see that.
I've seen it,
Mm-hmm.
with some with a small drop of water inside that they say trapped million years ago.
Mm.
So if to follow yours, what sort of crystal, your particular character, what sort of insect or what sort of,
Well, I mean, I think diamond. I mean, I can see diamonds surviving because my model would allow that the impact within a second of impact you get. I don't know about. I mean, carbon-containing, things like insects are going to disappear. But diamonds, if there's this second ejection of the glass through a shower of material, it would pick up the red material, which we see in the red streak glass. It might, in another area, pick up bits of the meteorite. It might, in another area, pick up impact diamonds. I mean that, but it's all speculative. You will find now, if you look in the book, chapter 5 or chapter 6, you'll see what I think is a spectrum of Shui jing that you'll find, and you'll find there's quite a lot in Hong Kong actually. Some of it's clear, like the bit that John's got there. Some of it is red streaked. Some of it's much rarer. I haven't found any blue streaked in Hong Kong, but clearly that's coming out from somewhere. And then this opalescent stuff, and all of them, there's a variable amount of incorporated material. It just varies from piece to piece. But they all have the characteristic, as far as we know, that the background white glass is pure silica glass. So it's picked up, I presume. I mean, it's only a theory. I don't know how you get a water persisting, but it could be that, you know, that we don't know what the gas inside the bubbles is, and that might be highly informative.
One last question?
The skull that you showed has such precision, I can't imagine that's done by prehistoric means. Can't it be a fake?
Well, it's a strange thing to fake. I've got the sister piece, and they both cost $22.
Could you find that?
Sure.
It looks to me very precise.
Well, no. Actually, the two are the sister pieces. If you compare them, wait a minute. It's just that's a shatter cone. I don't want that. Let's see. I'm not sure how to get to it without. Okay. It's hung on me in some way.
I'm sorry to put you to the inconvenience.
No. I mean, sorry. Fake it and then encase diamonds in it, and I mean, it's just. Well, they had a technology. They could cut things. I mean, the technology. They must have had extraordinary saws, presumably hand-driven. I mean, we have no idea what the technology is, but we underestimate greatly the capacity of Neolithic man. I think we do. I'll just find it for you in a moment. Where are we? There we are. I mean, it's what's your point, Peter?
Well,
that
if you look at the eyes are very symmetrical.
yeah.
The teeth are extremely symmetrical and well carved.
Yeah, but if you're doing the thing for the emperor or the head, I mean, you know, you want it to look perfect. I mean, I don't see really. In fact, probably if you look up close, often with these pieces, which you wouldn't get if something had been made by, you know, to a formula.
Have you come across any fakes?
In Shui jing.
Yeah.
Oh well, I mean, there's some awful stuff. I don't know. There's not, I obviously don't try not. I try to collect the best. I think that things should be judged by the best, but fake, in what sense? That the material is wrong, or that
made out of glass, but carved to look as though it's old.
I don't know. I don't believe so, because. But I mean, that is difficult to answer. But I mean, if you look at if you look at the tubes, for example, I mean, there's got to be a business model for everything. We you know, I don't need to tell you that, you're a businessman. In China, I'll tell you what they pay agate carvers, and agate carving is a bit easier, but you need, you know, diamond tools and things. They pay 250. This was 4 years ago. They were paying 250 to 600 renminbi a month, US dollars a month, for their carvers. $250 was going to the girls polishing, and $600 was going to the guys who were doing the carving. It's real money. And that's why I argued this yesterday. The small, I think it's, and in the book I've got an argument about, what's the business model of a faker and the business model of a tomb robber are different. A tomb robber's got real problems because he has no control over what's coming out. And he's got to get it out as quickly as possible and get rid of it as quickly as possible. And he has no control, therefore, he's got no control over the market he's selling it to. So, isn't it possible? I mean, you can't, how could you fake that really large piece? You can't make it. There has to be a limit to how far you can take this argument. The little pieces, well, you could do, but then they're going for next to nothing. So I think I think the nature of evidence, you take everything into consideration, and my money is on this being archaic. If it's fake, it's got to be made in the last 50 years because the culture wasn't even known about before that. Or maybe a bit more than 50 years. And I know it's interesting, I met an old boy in Hong Kong this week, a dealer, he's got some quite good Shui jing. It's overpriced, which he was absolutely consistent in his story. He bought in Shanghai in 1982. And it looks as if it's been hanging around in his shop for that long. One of its pieces has been used as an ashtray. You can see that it's been handled a lot. And I think it's more likely that there's just an enormous amount of tomb robbing going on and nobody's putting any value on this stuff.